The indie survival horror space seems to be the gift that keeps on giving, and today for you, I have a collection of 4 upcoming indie survival horror games that you need to play. I made a video like this a little while ago, and you guys seemed to enjoy that, and after I came across another slew of indie survival horror games that I liked, I knew I had to make another video like this for you all. So in this video, I'll be looking at 4 upcoming indie survival horror games that all have demos, so you can check them out for yourself, after watching this entire video first of course. So without any further delay, let's sink our teeth into some amazing upcoming indie survival horror games. To start off this list, I have a very odd and unique one for you. Risu is a PlayStation 1 styled survival horror game that is really unique. The game follows Risu, a young girl who, following the death of her mother, goes to live with her father, which will see our protagonist end up in a rather disturbing place. Now, the actual gameplay of Risu is interesting. The demo features 0 enemies we can fight or combat of any kind, but regardless, the game's great atmosphere and tension had me on edge anyways. In the demo, players explore what looks to be a school of sorts. We traverse the halls looking for key items in order to solve puzzles and progress, and that's the main gameplay loop of Risu. The protagonist is armed with nothing but her old phone, which seems to me like an old Nokia. You can find a handful of other items through the demo, and they are all used in puzzles. This game's puzzle design reminded me of some of the puzzles seen in Silent Hill 2 and 3, where players must combine items to fix logical problems. Like for an example, in this game, there is a key stuck at the bottom of a pipe, so you combine some string and a magnet and lower it into the pipe to get the key, that sort of thing. I also have to mention the game's graphics and art style, as they are a highlight here. Its pixelated PS1-esque art style I really liked. Environments were still fairly detailed and easy on the eyes, so it avoids the drawback of unclear backgrounds which some PS1 style games can sometimes hold. The game also seems to hold some supernatural elements to it. Risu also doesn't take itself too seriously. The entire game, our protagonist is very witty, and in one instance, a puzzle we must complete starts off as just a lump of shit. And being honest, this game's sarcastic kind of humour got a few chuckles out of me. But outside of what I've said already, that's really it. I mean, if you know what you're doing, this demo can be beaten in about 2 minutes, and it ends just as I was getting ready for more. The game surprisingly ends with a quote unquote boss battle in which this floating demonic head relentlessly attacks the player, and with no method of fighting back, the only way to progress is to get hit, which prompts the credits and closes the game. And well, I don't know if we're gonna see more from Risu. After playing Risu for this video, I did some research and found out that this game was a part of an itch.io game jam back in 2021, and there hasn't been any updates since. There is screenshots that show more layers to this game, including its phone menu system, but after searching around and looking up info about the game's developer and publisher, I have found nothing, which sadly leads me to believe that this game was either just a small game jam game, a proof of concept, or potentially it was cancelled. I will keep my ear to the ground if anything is to happen with Risu, and I recommend you all at least go check out the game's demo, as it's a fun little atmospheric romp, but nothing more, which is sad because I had high hopes before playing this one. Welcome to Dolltown is a very atmospheric little game that has me very eager to experience the full lot of it. Welcome to Dolltown sees us take on the role of Yumi, a young girl who has just arrived in the town. We are greeted by another young girl called Frangin, who shows us around the town. And here we see that there is something not quite right with the people of the town, or well, I should say the dolls of the town, as there seems to be no organic life left here, just hyper-realistic moving dolls. These dolls then stare at Yumi as if she's a fresh piece of meat as we first travel through the town. Upon first roaming the streets of the town, it's clear this game takes heavy inspiration from the Silent Hill series for its fog and atmosphere. The music and ambience also feels very Akira Yamaoka-esque. Now, the game's art style is what separates it from the crowd of indie survival horror games. The game uses lots of cold shades of white, grey and black, and it adds to the game's atmosphere and vibes in a way that's hard to explain. As for the gameplay, we only get a small taste of it here in this demo, and the game, surprisingly enough, has combat unlike any survival horror game. In this game, Yumi doesn't use firearms or even melee weapons. Instead, she attacks enemy dolls with her bare hands. Yep, in this game you play as a little girl who goes around swinging haymakers at dolls, and I find it so funny and unique how the game's combat is. Dolltown's demo is very story heavy, and I'm here for the story it has to tell. Immediately upon launching the game, you'll be met with a PSA about suicide prevention. It offers messages urging anyone with those thoughts in mind to seek out friends or family, as well as listing many countries' national suicide support lines. And I applaud the developers for having this PSA here, because this is a true message. You are not alone, you are loved, and if you do suffer from any thoughts of suicide or self-harm, please, I urge you to think twice before you do something permanent to solve a temporary issue. The reason Dolltown has these PSAs is because a central part of the game's story involves a little girl killing herself after being bullied in school, which is unfortunately a very real topic, with far too many examples of such occurring in real life. I won't say too much more for the game's story, as it's best for you to experience it for yourself, but I did very much enjoy the cliffhanger the game's demo leaves you on. Other notable reasons as to why you should play this game: 1. You can pet a cat, and 2. You can do the Macarena. So now that you're sold and welcome to Dolltown, luckily for you, we actually have a release date, the 14th of February 2026, and I can definitely see myself picking this one up and covering it in a future video. The game's story really intrigued me, as it covers real themes such as bullying, depression, loss, and much more. The game did have a little jank and it's kind of rough around the edges in some regards, but I'm sure a lot of this will be fixed for its full release. It also seems like the game could be split into episodes, or maybe that's just chapter selects in the game's menus. The town itself also had this empty but I'm being watched sort of feeling, and in the full game, I do hope we can explore the town to a greater extent, because it's a very interesting location just from the small demo I played. I highly recommend you check out the Welcome to Dolltown demo, and who knows, this may not be the last time you see it on the channel. Ground Zero is a really well designed survival horror game that takes genre-wide mechanics and freshens them up, which is tied together with some really smooth moment-to-moment gameplay, as well as a slew of gorgeous unique locations we can explore. To start, the game is set in the year 2030, after a meteor strike crashes into the heart of Korea. So Young, our playable protagonist, is sent in to investigate the ruins and uncover crucial data on the meteor. And this isn't a normal meteor strike either. Oh no, this is something far more extraterrestrial, and that's our main story setup. It's short, sweet, gives us a reason to be there, and sets up the environments we'll get to see. And it gets us into the game as quick as possible, which I like. And immediately I am blown away by this game's gorgeous environments. This demo actually features 2 routes, the beach route and the amusement park route, and both of them will have you exploring a wealth of different environments. The interior of a shipwrecked boat, the beach's pier, an amusement park, even an arcade. And then, regardless of what route you chose, you then wind up in the main central city of Korea, which again is so visually stunning and fun to explore. And I really liked how all the different locales are pretty well linked together. Nothing feels out of place, and the game has a great sense of flow through exploring its environments. And how do we experience these gorgeous environments? Well, this game uses the ever classic fixed camera angles, which I love. There was a nice variety of the types of camera angles, and it didn't feel too static, and I loved what the devs went for with this camera style. The game's art style is also a highlight here. It kind of reminds me of some pre-rendered backgrounds in some aspects, and character models look like if you upscale the PS2 character model, and that's a really cool style. Speaking on the characters, I really like our main protagonist Seo Young. She's witty, clever and badass all in one. I also like how since she speaks both Korean and English, she will sometimes flip back and forth between the 2 languages in the middle of a conversation, which is super authentic to multi-language speakers. Now Ground Zero takes some genre-wide mechanics and flips them on their head. For example, if you want to save in Ground Zero, players must use an item to unlock a save point, which players can then save an infinite amount of times. So it's kinda like the ink ribbons in older Resident Evil games, but less limited. Then, in order to access the item box, you actually have to solve a maths puzzle, which had me shook initially because I'm crap at maths. Whenever you find a new item box, you'll be given a few numbers along with a plus and a minus. You will then be asked to find a certain value with all of the numbers given. Alternatively, you can use an item to blow the lock off the item box and just access this item box anyways. But if players do use their brain and figure out the code, they will be rewarded with some items, which is a nice bonus for using your noggin. Another genre staple mechanic that's been mixed up here is the game's health items. Of course, we can find standard medkits throughout the game that will heal you, but you can also find 3 different types of syringes. Think of these syringes as the 3 different colour herbs from a Resident Evil game. Players can load these different syringes into Seo Young's medical injector. The injector holds 3 different mixes at once, so you can mix and match what you load up to give you some different effects. To start, you have a standard health syringe that will heal you a small amount. Then you have a fitness syringe that gives you a small amount of stamina and increases defenses slightly. Then, finally, we have an immunity booster to help against infection. So you can choose what ones you want to have loaded in your medical injector for a quick heal or buff at a moment's notice. And I really like this mechanic as it feels more user controlled compared to the herbs in Resident Evil games, which have very set combinations. Mentioning Resident Evil now, and that's clear where this game draws its biggest inspirations from, especially in the gameplay department. Outside of the mechanics I've just described to you, we have the classic Resident Evil gameplay format here. Scavenge around for health items, ammo, weapons and key puzzle items in order to progress along, all while managing your limited inventory space. And something I actually appreciate here that's different is the game's interesting weapons choice. Sao Young starts with a Desert Eagle, which is a pretty powerful handgun, and typically in survival horror games, this would be reserved as a late game find, but here it's given to you from the get-go, and you want to get comfortable with this handgun as you'll be using it a lot. The game's combat is best described as Signalis but 3D. The game's aiming system is exactly what we see in Signalis, but on a fully 3D space, and combat is really fun and smooth. It took me a little while to get the hang of things, but once I did, I was running through enemies like a madman. In the demo, players can encounter 3 kinds of enemies. Your standard zombie-like creatures that slowly limp towards you, these dog-like creatures which are faster but have less health, and a more mutated version of the standard zombie, which now features a tentacle arm and projectile attack. These enemy designs are really cool and feel unique to the game with its meteor parasite kind of plotline going on. In gameplay, these enemies all handle differently. The standard zombie, for example, may seem like a non-threat, but once you first shoot it, then they will speed up and start sprinting towards you, which leads to a lot of moments where I'd be backed into a corner, shooting my gun like crazy, just hoping I'd kill them before they got to me. And like I said earlier about our starting pistol being super powerful, that comes at a cost. Since to counteract this, it has a very low magazine capacity of just 7 shots, so you must bear that in mind when fighting enemies. And initially I was avoiding some enemies and choosing to run by them, but that may not be in your best interest, since in a cool story tie-in moment, players can extract geomes or DNA from defeated enemies. This is a currency that can be used in the game's shop system in order to acquire new weapons and much needed supplies. When defeating an enemy, how you kill them affects their body, which in turn influences how many geomes you get. Cleanly take their head off their shoulders or use minimal well-placed shots, you're going to get a good score and a nice payout. Obliterate your enemies with a shotgun, that's going to really mess up their body and your grade/geome payout. And this is a really unique system that had me at times actively seeking out enemies in order to get geomes. While exploring the streets of Korea, I was very impressed by the game's sound design and atmosphere. The desolate streets of the city, combined with the heavy rain and ambience, really had me immersed in the game. And there is some pretty good tracks on the game's OST to vibe along to while exploring. Overall, you can probably tell that I'm super impressed with Ground Zero, as it has such smooth gameplay, gorgeous locations and environments, and a really unique and cool story setup. And not only this, but it's really engaging mechanically. But of course, no game is perfect. So in short, where does this game fall flat? There was some slight performance issues I noticed, a few stutters and hiccups here and there, primarily in the main city area. Also, initially, controls are a little funky and hard to get used to, but over time you adjust to them just fine. And my main criticism is the UI design, because man, I really hope it's temporary. Reading notes and other information in the HUD was really hard for me, and overall, I get what the devs are going for here, but in some instances, it kinda looked cheap and half finished. Which I'll assume it is, since this is just a demo, but it sticks out to me because the rest of the game is so damn amazing. Another thing I wanted to point out that's not a pro or a con, but a potential con, is the lack of puzzles. There wasn't a whole lot in the demo. There was a keypad, some key fetch quests, and that's about it. So I do hope we see more on the full game's release. But like I said, that's not a pro or a con, but something that could be a con if the full game is like this. Reflecting on it now, I had an absolute blast playing Ground Zero, and I highly recommend you check the demo out for yourself. As between the 2 routes, I got well over 2 hours of game time, which is a lot for a demo. Ground Zero impressed me a lot, and I'm very interested in the full game. So just like Dolltown, this may not be the last time you see this game on the channel.
Let's go, we've got no time to waste.
Whoa, hold on.
Now this game right here has been recommended to me by some of you guys for some time now, and you know what? I fully understand why. SSR Wives is one of the most mind-bending, gorgeous experiences I've had in a hot minute. It's a survival horror game that I can barely compare to others since it's just so unique. To start, SSR Wives absolutely oozes artistic style. Every menu has such an artsy feel to it. Even something as simple as selecting a character to play the game's demo is full of visual flair, unlike anything I've ever seen before. And SSR Wives, in what must be a genre first, allows players to play a survival horror game as a puppy girl, which means this game is already a masterpiece. The game's overall aesthetic is superb and is unlike anything I've ever played, and the game allows for a large amount of customization for how you want it to look, with several display modes from PSX and PS2 like aesthetics, a native PC version, along with a CRT variant. SSR Wives really lets the player craft how the game will look. The The game's aesthetics in every aspect are just so unique, and this is shown even through something like the game's font and text. And before I can go on any further with this portion of the video, I must mention the incredible soundtrack featured in this game. This is some of the best video game music I have had the pleasure of listening to in a very long time. There is a rather nice variety in songs in this demo. The main theme reminds me of grungy early 2000s rock. And while exploring through this demo, you will journey through a variety of locations with very contrasting visual styles, and somehow there seems to be a new track to match the environment perfectly every time. It's hard to explain, but the music you hear always perfectly describes and encapsulates the visuals on screen and environment as much as the song can, if that makes sense. Some of the tracks here remind me of some of Akira Yamaoka's work, but almost like a new style of his work, if that makes sense. The developers knew they had an incredible OST on their hands, since there was actually a music player built into the game's demo, which allows players to select any song from the game's soundtrack and listen to it. Having great visual style is one thing, but having excellent music to match that is another, and SSR Wives has both in bucket loads. And not only does the game feature incredible style and music, its environments in-game are also gorgeous and varied. We explore this apartment block of sorts, but each room we enter breaks the boundaries of what should be inside a normal apartment. From a completely ice-covered room, an overgrown forest of sorts, to this mysterious hole room. You never quite know what's in the next room before you enter it, and it kept me on my toes the entire duration of the game's demo. And I really like this design philosophy. The developers not restricting their environmental design to real world norms made this game stick out even more. To pair with these gorgeous environments, we also have some great detail in the game's protagonist. There are 3 different protagonists to choose from in this demo: Luke, Grace, and the previously mentioned puppy girl, Lacey, who was my pick. There is a great level of detail in the character models and animations. Despite not having any dialogue, Lacey is very expressive, from her walk and running animations to how she fights. The sheer amount of detail was unexpected, but a nice addition. Now, for all the visual and audio style this game has, what's the gameplay like? Since without that, we don't really have a game. Well, it's really solid. SSR Wives features both tank controls and a more modern control style, and if you know me, you'll know which one I chose. The tank controls felt great and easy to use, but again, I'm a big lover of them anyways. The camera system in SSR Wives is a classic survival horror system, but not the one you may expect. This game doesn't feature traditional static fixed camera angles. Instead, it utilizes a more dynamic camera system, seeing the likes of Silent Hill 2, which will see the camera mainly set up in one location, but will tend to follow the player's movements until the player moves into a different camera spot. So it's a version of fixed camera that also moves with the player, and I loved it here. It still gave me the challenges of fixed camera angles, such as enemies appearing off screen, but I got the freedom to look around the environment more and see more of the game. And even at the touch of a button, you can enter a first person mode to look around in, which is an unnecessary but welcome addition. Now as for combat, SSR Wives is similar to classic survival horror games of the past. We can find a few melee weapons throughout the demo and even a handgun, and they all handle smoothly. Melee combat even features a combo system of sorts. And as for enemies we face in the game, we see some recognisable creatures, such as cockroaches, rats, a caterpillar of sorts. You know, all real world things, just sized up a little in order to make them more of a threat. But what I didn't expect to see was whatever the fuck this is. I put my controller down for 2 seconds, since I was already re-exploring a previously explored area, and then this thing showed up and scared the absolute piss out of me. As any good survival horror game would go, SSR Wives also has a nice amount of puzzles for us to go through, and they weren't too challenging at all, and maybe on the more easy side of things, but nonetheless, they were satisfying to solve. A mechanic I enjoyed in the demo was how you could smash open various boxes and vases in order to obtain new items. While this has been in survival horror games of the past, it wasn't super obvious what ones you could and couldn't break, and I liked how it was up to the player to try breaking different objects apart. Also a funny addition is the game's healing items. In SSR Wives, healing items are just various foods, from cans of fizzy drinks to apples or slices of pizza. As for the story in the game's demo, it's hard for me to gauge one just from the demo I played, but there was continuous use of religious elements and symbolism, so I would expect the game to have some religious ties to its story. Now, I have nothing but praise for this game thus far, but I do have some criticism, and that mainly boils down to the game being kinda buggy in some instances. Sometimes during combat, I wouldn't be able to hit enemies, or the hitboxes were being janky and hard to hit, and other times I would get frozen on a menu, with no way to back out, which caused me to have to Alt F4 to fix it, resulting in a loss of progress, which really annoyed me. I also wasn't able to get my controller working properly. Maybe it was just an odd bug, but particularly when reading notes, my controller just didn't want to cooperate, so I opted to use mouse and keyboard. Finishing up this section of the video, I'm in love with SSR Wives, and I can absolutely see why you guys were telling me to check this game out, so thank you so much for recommending it to me. I absolutely love what this game is doing. It's such a fresh new take on survival horror. Its unique visuals, killer soundtrack, diverse environmental design, and honestly great camera direction made me enjoy every second of playing when I wasn't getting bothered by bugs, and I'm not talking about cockroaches. I am all in on SSR Wives and what the developers are going for. SSR Wives, The Murder of My Winter Crush is truly a unique indie solo horror game that I urge you to check out for yourself, because the game is going to just capture you for its roughly hour duration. And I am craving more of this game so bad, and actually the game is slated for a January 2026 release, so it seems like we won't have to wait long to see more. So what was your favourite indie game from today's video? Me personally, I do think it is Ground Zero, but that's followed very closely by SSR Wives. It's so great to see the indie space constantly dropping brand new releases that are all so unique and creative. And this isn't even the tip of the iceberg. There are still a lot of indies on my radar that are either releasing too soon to include in this video, or only currently have trailers available. But trust me, once there is a demo, I will be covering it. And hey, let me know down below if you enjoy these videos covering upcoming indie solo horror games, as I will try to keep these a regular video type on the channel, so that you can all stay informed on the latest and greatest indies releasing. And with that, I think that's all I have for you today. 4 games this time, not 5 like last, but I feel like I covered a variety of different types of games, so that I'm sure there's something here for everyone. And with that, I want to thank you so very much for watching this video, and I will hopefully see you in my next one. Peace.